Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you guys have had a wonderful day. So this week's a little bit of a treat for you guys. We had two in a week. So today we've got Mark Gordon, who's coming back, and he's going to continue talking about the pillars of communication, or actually of healthy relationship. So pillar number one is communication, and the second pillar is authenticity. For those of you who don't know, I'm Fatima.
I'm John.
Excellent. So I'll just introduce Mark. Mark Gordon has been involved in faith, business, and community leadership and family coaching, and a keynote speaker for more than 30 years. His passion for people is evident, whether speaking, writing, or coaching. He is passionate to inspire and empower people, families, and organizations to become rationally, emotionally, and spiritually healthy. He has recently released a book called Relationship Matters, an essential blueprint for building strong families and fostering healthy relationships. However, Mark says, "My greatest accomplishment is my family. Being married to my amazing wife, Sandy, for 39 years, I am blessed to have 3 amazing children who have married 3 more amazing people, and of course, my greatest joy, my 2 grandchildren." Currently, Mark is the CEO of Mark Gordon Enterprises, speaker, author, and leadership coach, keynote speaker on a variety of topics to do with building healthy relationships for families and organizations, facilitator of multiple workshops, including Relationship Matters, Strength-Based Parenting, Understanding Anger, Shadow Boxing, Dealing with Shame, Strength-Based Leadership, and others. Let's bring on Mark.
Hello.
Hey,
Had
Mark.
to push a couple buttons there to get in. Get my mic
Apparently
working.
technology is not having our day today. It's not, it's just being weird, but it's okay.
That's all right. That's all right. It's good to be here.
Good to have you back.
So we left off with, so there's 5 pillars. We did the first one. If you could just quickly remind us what the first one is. You don't have to go into details.
The first pillar in the 5 pillars is trust, because it's the cornerstone. It holds up the weight of the relationship. Without trust, it's really difficult to have a healthy relationship. So yeah, trust. We talked about trust last time. So you can go, your viewers can go back and watch that and go find it. I'm sure it's still on your Facebook, but we talked about trust. And today we're heading to 2 more pillars. The second pillar is communication, or healthy communication. And the third and central pillar is authenticity. So we're going to cover those 2 today. The next one is honesty, and the last one is honor.
So those ones we're going to be covering the next one. So let's get it started. So what does communication, why is communication important in relationships?
Well, communication affects all other pillars, right? When we can't communicate clearly and express our needs and our wants and desires to one another, it affects our ability to relate to each other. You know, the word relationship means to relate one to another. And so communication becomes very important to this. And a couple of points about communication. One is it's more than talking. Communication is always bi-directional. It's always, because we're communicating even now, you know, even if I'm not talking to, let's say, John directly, I'm talking to you, but he's listening in, he's communicating to us with his attention, with his body language, with other ways. So communication's also verbal and nonverbal. So it's bi-directional and it's verbal and nonverbal. And so it's important, because even when we don't think we're communicating, sometimes we are communicating with our facial expressions, with our arms crossed. You know, we can say a lot with our bodies and whatnot. And so it's really important to understand that, because I don't think people think about it just on the fly of life. You don't think about it, but communication is super important. And it's important to be able to express yourself and to express and receive love, to express and receive, set boundaries, to be able to I believe, in fact, that our gifts and abilities are even to help us to communicate better. And so that's kind of where I come from. And so the other thing is, I think some of the components is you want to listen to understand. So there's active listening we'll talk about in a few minutes. You want to speak from the heart, not the pain. A lot of people say, well, what does that mean? Well, quite often, if we have pain in relationships, we'll tend to speak out of that anger place. But it usually, anger is always a secondary emotion. So there's either hurt or resentment and things that are further down. So when we speak out of our pain, I always tell people, nobody listens to an angry voice. And so when it comes out, when we're communicating with a specific tone of voice, we could actually, somebody won't hear us. And then we feel like we're not being heard. And then it creates conflict. Communication is probably the greatest thing that creates conflict. But I like what Max Lucado said. In a book he wrote, he said, conflict is inevitable, combat is optional. I really like that one. And so we want to speak from the heart so that we can share and express what's in our hearts, not what's in our angry head. And then, of course, body language is really important. And so, but here's a little factoid that really shocked me. You may have heard, that our words are powerful, that they can create life or death. And I really believe that our tongue can be a weapon or a gift, right? And so I think that sometimes our words they carry a lot of weight. But I saw this stat that there's 3 phases of communication: tone of voice, words that we speak, and body language are the 3 areas that we're always communicating in. And I thought that was very interesting. And when I saw the percentages, I was blown away. What this study did is it showed that only 7% of the words that we speak are actually, important to communications. 38% is tone of voice, and 55% is body language. So effective communication aren't just the words we speak, it's the tone we use while we speak them and the body language we use while we're speaking them. And I thought about that and I thought, boy, but words are so important too. But then I realized, the tone of voice and body language is the rocket fuel to those words. So they actually can either demonstrate the words to be true and more acceptable. Like, in other words, we can speak with more authority when we use tone of voice and when we use our body language. And so I realized, wow, you can say the same exact words to somebody, but you can change the context with just tone of voice or just your body language. And so communication in a relationship is so important, but we have to be thinking about all 3 of those. Yes, we pick our words carefully. We want to be affirming. We want to be encouraging. But our body language also says something, and so does our tone of voice. And so isn't that amazing? Like,
that's pretty crazy. That's you never think about like the other 2. So then how would you actually control, or how would you sort of make sure that everything is in alignment and you're trying to get that message across, even when, like you're in that place of like hurt or anger or shame, as opposed to like, when you're in a place of happiness, it's easy to have all of it rounded, but it's that time when you're sort of, in the other emotions that it's hard to have them all aligned. So how would you sort of align them?
Well, the difficult part when you're in an anger state, when your brain is released, your primal part of your brain, you're reacting out of the primal part of your brain, it releases adrenaline into your prefrontal cortex. So I use a snow globe. If you shake it, that's how many thoughts you have a second, and so all the snow in that snow globe represent your thoughts. And so you can't collect your thoughts to actually, you don't have the ability to think about body language and tone of voice. So when you need to practice that is when things are okay. In other words, there's 2 times. One is before you have the conversation. Think it through, work through what you want to say. What do you need to express? What are you trying to tell the person? And then the second component is afterwards. If I did lose it, if I did say harsh things, or I said things with a sarcastic tone in my voice or whatever, and I realized that that did not get my needs met, then what happens is I need to go back and make it right. And a lot of people don't think about that. Like, we also have to undo communication sometimes. Sometimes it's uncommunication. We have to go back and fix a communication that we shared. Because think about the tone of voice. Like, you never do it. You never, let's say taking the garbage out. You never take the garbage out. Well, that's a very different conversation than if you said, I just want to talk to you about something that's kind of been bothering me. I want you to understand that, I'm not angry, but I want you to understand it's really important that you take the garbage out when you say you're going to, because it breaks trust with me when you don't. That's a very different, you can hear my tone was different, my body language, I'm looking him at the eyes, I'm using that kind of conversation in an appropriate way. And so your tone of voice matters. So which one do you think the person's going to listen to?
The second.
Right. So you can plan ahead. And I always say, if you want to have a good meal, set the table first. So in the same way, if you want to have a difficult conversation, set the table. Like, justify it for, hey, I have something difficult to talk to you about, but I really want it because I care about you. I want us to have connection. And so I do need to bring it up. And so can we, when's a good time that we could sit down and talk? So the time that you communicate is also important. And so that's kind of just a little, helpful. But there's 4 communication styles that maybe we can just touch on that might help a little bit. There's passive communicators. Those are people kind of that want to maintain harmony at all costs. Their needs, feelings, and wants are kind of ignored. And so I like a way that I've heard it put is like, you let people pass right over you. So a passive communicator often is a reaction to helplessness. Maybe they didn't feel they had a voice when they were a kid, and so they just don't speak up. But then they carry resentment in their heart because they aren't heard, but they actually didn't do the speaking, right? So passive communicators tend to get walked over a little bit. The next one is manipulative communicators, or what you might have heard, passive aggressive. So they're their needs and wants and feelings are expressed, but kind of partially and hinted at. By the way, sarcasm is 89% of the time is actually a form of anger. So they'll use a little sarcastic, what, you can't take a joke? Right. But they were trying to communicate something without actually saying it. So a passive aggressive communicator will be passive in a manner that hurts others. A lot of times they'll share secrets with someone else, like, well, Susie and me talked about something and you don't know anything about it. And so you're trying to punish that person with your communication without actually telling them what they did wrong. And that's very destructive. It is very hurtful. A lot of times they'll use shame tactics to try and get you to do what they want. My mom was kind of a master at this. My dad was a very aggressive communicator, which is the next one. And they'll make their needs and wants and everything known, but at the cost of other people. And they're get very aggressive because that's the way they're defending their heart, is that they're being aggressive. And so because my dad was aggressive, my mom was passive with him, let him walk right over her, but was passive aggressive with the kids because she never learned how to use her voice to just tell us what she needed. She would use tactics to try and get us to do what she wanted us to do. And so you can see how those it can be passed on through the generations, right? So, it's important. So aggressive, yes, their needs and feelings are definitely expressed, but at another person's expense. They're loud, direct, insulting, name cover. And of course, it works in the moment, but it doesn't work long term. It hurts and damages relationships. And so, they need to get past that. Where we want to land, what we want to work towards is assertive communication. So the 4th style of communication is assertive. And assertive is you maintain everybody's dignity, you speak respectfully, but you make your needs and wants and feelings very known. And how you do that is by using I language. I don't know if you've ever heard that term, but using I language can really help you. So you asked me, Fatima, how can we manage that, our tone of voice and all that? Using I language is very powerful. So there's three components to I language that I'll share with you. I feel, when I feel, and I want. So in a conversation, when you're communicating, I'll use an example I'll use a specific example. I feel hurt when I'm yelled at. When I feel hurt, I yell back. So I want us to get along, and I don't want us to yell at each other anymore. That communication is very different than me saying, you always yell at me. You never, the absolute language, right? You never do this. You always do that. And what happens is that you're communicating, but you're not being heard. You language will always escalate conflict. I language will always de-escalate. I want you to understand my heart. I want you to know how I feel so that we can become closer. That's going to be a very different conversation than when we use you language and accuse somebody of something and
I like that.
Make a judgment. So I language really allows you to communicate your needs and what you need without actually causing damage to the person. And if they do kind of react to you, because of course it takes two, right? But if they do kind of still react, at least you've used I language, and you can even say that if they start to react, you can say, hey, I don't want you to feel like you have to be defensive here. I'm not accusing you. I'm just telling you how I'm feeling and how I'm processing what happened. And I'm giving you, the word intimacy, I think we talked about this on the trust pillar. The word intimacy, if you slow it down, it's into me you see. So when you communicate in a way that is transparent and allows somebody to see what's going on in your heart, it actually endears them. It actually makes a connection instead of a fight. It makes a connection. And so that's a really powerful way of doing that.
And you touched on, like, I'm hearing everything and it's wonderful and all that, but what would you guide, say, parents that are working with smaller children? Because the communication process is, you have to, I don't know if you want to call it adapt, but it has to be different.
Well, it has to be age appropriate first and foremost. But secondly, that's a great question. I actually encourage parents to use I language with their kids. Let them know what you want to teach your kids how to make good decisions and how to have healthy relationship. You got to model it first and foremost. And so I would quite often encourage one thing I always say, connect before you direct. So what you want to do is create a connection with that child first, and then ask them to do what you've asked them to do, or to correct a behavior, if you will. A lot of times people will try to correct the behavior without actually making the connection. You got to address the feeling first. There's always a cause and effect. Mm-hmm. So in communication, you want to understand their feelings. So you could ask them that, what were you feeling in your heart just before you threw that truck at your brother's head? You want to ask them, like, what was going on? Well, he took my, oh, well, how did that make you feel? Well, I felt sad or felt mad or whatever. Like, you can help them work through their emotions, because kids don't understand what's going on. So you help them through by asking them questions, and then you contrast behavior from personhood. This is huge for parents. Communicate value to the personhood and contrast the behavior. I'll give you an example. When one of my kids was younger, and maybe, I think they were just early teens or something, and they were lying to me, and honesty was a high value in our family. And I was like, so instead of saying, you're such a liar, I actually sat down and said, I want to know what's going on in your heart. Why? I want to understand, because the fact is, you're not a liar, and you're a compassionate kid. You're an amazing young man. I just want to understand why you're lying to me. You see, I contrasted their personhood from their behavior. This is not who you are. But a lot of times when we're angry, we'll label the kid with whatever we're angry about with the behavior. You're so mean, or, you're such a liar, or, when we do that, we're actually labeling their personhood, and we start to shape the way they feel. And that kind of communication is breaching the relationship. It's breaking the relationship down. Whereas if you use communication to seek understanding, I call it active listening. When you active listen and you ask questions to understand their heart, Don't just ask questions for the sake of questions, but actually ask to understand their heart. And when you do that, you make an emotional connection, then you've earned the right to actually speak into the direction of their behavior and say, I understand you felt upset that your brother took your toy. I just want you to know it's not okay. It's okay to feel upset. It's not okay to hit him or throw a toy. And because in our family, we love each other. You want to bring it back to the core values of the family all the time. And in that kind of communication, when you can do that, it's a win-win for everybody. Everybody wins in that kind of thing.
Right.
So, yeah. So active listening is simply giving your undivided attention. It's giving eye contact and listening to what they're trying to say, not just what they are saying. So you want to listen to what I call listen to understand. You want to hear kind of what is the why behind what they're feeling or what they're saying. And then you also, as you express back their emotions, find space, when you're listening, find space to reflect back. Are you saying, I want to understand. I really want to hear your heart. Are you saying this? And no, that's not what I meant. You're giving them space and grace, what I call space and grace. You allow them a way of figuring it out with them. You're on a journey together. And that creates connection. So the trust pillar gets built up through healthy communication, or it gets broken down through unhealthy communication, where we just accuse and whatnot. Yeah. So I hopefully that helps. The biggest thing, by the way, in active listening is don't be defensive. The second you're defensive or you're trying to protect yourself, you're not listening anymore.
And then, so you were mentioning earlier before we transition to our next pillar, I know you were mentioning something about empathetic listening. So what is that?
Yeah, so empathetic listening, active listening is the start. Empathetic listening, the word empathy, as you know, it simply means to step into somebody else's shoes and then step back out, like to understand how they might be experiencing something. So empathetic communication allows you to put yourself in their shoes for a minute. Well, if I was them and I experienced what they experienced through this conversation or through this conflict, how would I react? And a lot of times by taking and slowing that down and asking those questions, the first thing you do is you take yourself out of the primal part of your brain and you activate the prefrontal cortex of your brain. And the second thing you do is you start to realize, yeah, you know what, I would have done the same thing. I would have blown it too. And I can have a little more compassion. I can have a little more empathy towards them. So when you are empathetically listening, when you're empathetically communicating, you actually are trying to help them identify their feelings and the emotions that caused the conflict in the first place. So you literally are empathizing to the point and active listening to the point where you can actually help them discover why they reacted the way they reacted. And then they can do that for you as well. It can come the other way. It's like if I can be empathetic and slow this process down, and I can say, you know what, I want them to understand my heart too. And so you could even ask them, I'd like you to just maybe practice a little empathy as I share this with you, because I want you to understand my heart. Again, it comes down to the heart connection every single time. So empathy just is a tool to help you that. The good thing about empathy is not everybody's born with empathy. Some, depending on the way we're raised, we may not have experienced empathy, but everybody can learn empathy. It's a training of the brain you can do. And for some, it might be harder, but it can be developed. Just like emotional intelligence can be grown, so can empathy. And so again, you separate feelings from their behavior. So empathy allows you to help do that. Oh, like my first reaction in the old days, is, well, why am I being under attack here? Why are they attacking me? But now my first question I always ask is, oh, I wonder what's going on in their day that they're upset. I need to find out. I take a curiosity position on. That's a big part of the empathetic response in communication, is I take a curiosity position on. So I ask questions, which de-escalates, rather than making statements, which escalates conflict. And so communication is very powerful. And so when you can use communication to de-escalate a situation, then you can actually find out what's going on in them. So when you put yourself in their shoes, how would they feel if it was reversed? It actually allows your brain to kind of process what's going on so you don't react. And then your tone of voice is different. your body language is different. It's attentive, it's forward leaning. And because you're curious, it automatically makes your body forward lean and make eye contact. When you're not curious and you're judgmental, your body language is closed off and turned away. Don't make eye contact. You look away from them, and so that's how you know when they're feeling a little bit uncomfortable.
Wow, that was a lot. I'm excited about number 3, authenticity. I mean, this was definitely a lot of information. John, what do you say about
that? It comes down to, I think, to wrap that one up, if I can, is time. We just kind of have to take a little bit of time to just kind of either catch ourselves or give people the time to just kind of give that space, because like you said, when we feel defensive, we jump on something right away without having to step back and let someone so we're always gonna, we're butting heads instead of stepping back and saying, hey, and trying to analyze it from their point of view. But it comes time to, we're a busy society. We're always time crunching, and we don't have that. It's not that we don't have the time. We don't have the time to give ourselves, to catch ourselves to do that.
You never find time. You have to make time.
So it's another, it's a habit. It's something that you need to
and it's another tip. It's another tip in communication. Does take time. So don't try to communicate when there's no time.
It's a lifelong skill, right?
Yeah, you work on it all the time. It's to be conscious of it, and to, okay, how am I showing up? How am I presenting myself? How am I communicating? And you're being more aware of it. But the other piece is, like, don't try to solve problems, try to seek understanding. Because when you seek understanding, the problem will solve itself. And so so I would suggest, just to wrap that up, is if you're going to communicate and you need to have a real heart to heart, set time aside. You make time. You even set up an appointment with your spouse if you need to. Say, hey, there's some things I want to just talk about, but I want to give us time and space to do it. And so, maybe we could go away this weekend, or maybe we could just have a date night and just go, and I just want to share some things that are in my heart, and just set that time aside. You're never going to find time. You got to make time, and you got to prioritize each other. Your family is the most important asset in your life. It's more important than anything else, is your relationships, and especially with family and close friends. And so it's worth investing the time. Make the investment. It's well worth it.
Nice.
Yeah.
So next one.
So, communication leads right into authenticity, because how can, to practice what I just talked about in communication, you got to be authentic. And a lot of people, authentic could be an overused word. And so I think some people just tune it out because we've used it so much. But, most things that are talked about a lot, it's important. And so I think it's good to understand authenticity. Authenticity is people will say, well, just be yourself. Well, how do you be yourself if you don't know yourself? In fact, how do you believe in yourself if you don't know yourself? So there's a relationship I always talk about. There's 3 kind of relationships that we all need to pay attention to. One is with our Creator, and that depends on where your faith is at and who your creator. But I'm just saying it's got to be a higher power, something greater than ourselves. We need to relate to a creator. The second thing is we need to relate to ourselves, and then we can relate to others. If one of those 3 is out, they're all affected. So a lot of people, what they don't talk about is this relationship with self. I think because we were taught that if we think about ourselves, we must be selfish. I'm not talking about selfishness. Actually isn't thinking about yourself. It's being self-consumed. It's different. If you have confidence and you believe in yourself, you wouldn't talk about yourself as much. You wouldn't be so selfish. And so it's not about that. It's about learning to love yourself for who you are, who you were created to be. And so part of the authenticity journey is to actually find out, to get to know ourselves. Why do I do the things that I do? Awareness is so important. And so when you have self-awareness, when you develop the emotional intelligence, which is really important to this conversation, is you start to get to know yourself. You start to have awareness about why you do the things you do. awareness gives you choice. So if there's something that I don't like that I'm doing, I get to change it. But if I have blind spots towards that and I don't see it, how do I change what I don't see? And what the problem is in authenticity is when I don't know myself, I will tend to draw on other people's opinions about me, or I'll draw on societal opinions of me. In other words, if I want to be successful, I need a bigger house, bigger car, bigger bank account. That's not the definition of success. But if I don't know who I am, if I don't know what success is for me, then I might gravitate to that. I might be influenced by social media. I might be influenced by the media and what they say. And so it's really important to, and I believe now more than ever, when we see in our society today, I think it's so important for us to take the time to get to know ourselves, to understand who we are. And so, knowing yourself is emotional intelligence. It's growing in emotional intelligence. It's one of the main factors in relating to others. I always say, if you don't know yourself or you don't feel good about yourself, how do you feel good about others? It's impossible. Self-awareness gives you that choice. You're uniquely created. So I always tell people, embrace who you are and who you're not. I don't know about you, but I used to compare myself to other people. I'd look at how they were doing and think, oh man, I'm such a loser. And comparison is a deadly to authenticity, because I can't be that person. I'm me. So some of my learning journey was to actually learn who I wasn't. I didn't have to be that person. I just get to choose who I want to be. I want to create a positive narrative. For example, in my life, in my healing journey, I came to the conclusion that I was an encourager. I love giving courage to people. I loved making them feel valued. So my vision statement in my life is to reveal the value every person possesses. To do that, I want to be an encourager. So guess what? That's who I want to be. That's who I am. I practice. I am authentic to that. So when I encourage you, that's why I'm effective. When I encourage you, I really mean it. Like it's coming from an authentic place, because I know that my calling in life is to be an encourager. I know that my gift to the world is to be an encourager. And so when I encourage somebody, it comes from an authentic place and it carries authority. It carries authority because of that. And I think that a lot of people who are content creators these days and they don't have authority because they don't really believe from a core value place in their lives who they are. And so that was a big growth thing for me, was to realize that I don't have to be something. Greatest growth is two sides of the same coin. I started taking responsibility for who I was, and I stopped taking responsibility for who others were. Those two things created an authenticity in me that allowed me to be free, because I didn't have to be them. I didn't have to react to them. I wasn't responsible for them. I'm only responsible for who I am. And so if I'm treating somebody poorly, if I said something mean to my spouse or my kids, that is not encouraging. So I could easily take responsibility and say, you know what? That is not who I am. The problem is the negative things in our life quite often become our identity. And we don't like that, so we have to create a facade or put on a show for people. But I always say this, if you have to be something you're not to make somebody like you, then who do they like? If you have to be something that you're not to make someone love you, who do they love? How long can you keep that facade up? You can't. And that authenticity pillar crumbles, the building implodes. So all the other pillars come crashing down on top of it. So it's so important to understand knowing yourself. So what are the three components I talk about? Self-esteem, that's how you feel about yourself. Self-image is how you see yourself. Self-dignity is how you treat yourself. If I don't feel good about myself, I won't see myself in the right light. And if I don't see myself in the right light, I will not treat myself well. But here's the rub. If I don't feel good about me, I can't feel good about others. If I don't see myself in the right light, I can't see other people in the right light. If I don't treat myself well, I'm not going to treat others well. And so in my healing journey, I discovered this. So how do you change that? Well, self-image is in the middle of those for a reason. I believe that if you can actually change the way you see yourself, if you can actually decide and choose and look at, how do you discover that? Well, I believe you can look at your personality. You can look at the things you love to do. You can look at the things that give you life when you do them. Like, so for me, when I was encouraging others, it gave me life. I get charged up. I love doing this kind of stuff because I know I'm going to encourage somebody out there. Somebody in your audience is going to be encouraged today. I will do this for free. Well, I am doing this for free, but I'm saying I would work for free the rest of my life if I could just encourage somebody every day. So when I get to do that, I see myself as an encourager. I started feeling encouraged. I started feeling like an encourager. So my self-esteem changed because I started feeling good about myself when I was acting out on what I saw myself as being. And then I treated myself that way. How can I encourage others if I don't encourage myself? And if I do things in behavior-wise that are not encouraging, then I need to change them. And I need to let those things go from my life. And so I've had to make decisions in my life to adjust so that I'll say this quickly. In the integrity, we hear the word integrity, and we usually associate it with honesty or associate it with, you know, who you are when nobody's looking. And that is true. Who you are when nobody's looking is part of that authenticity. But I look at it this way. I put my hands. So when I have integrity, this hand represents who I say I am, and this represents who I actually am. When those are together, I have integrity. So when I actually practice who I say I am and who I see myself to be, then I feel good about myself because, hey, there's no gap. However, if some pain comes into my life and some things happen in my life, or I am not living up to that image of who I say I am, then what happens is an integrity gap starts to come in. In other words, if I have to do something to make somebody like me, I have an integrity gap because it's not being authentic. It's not being who I am. And the more that gap gets big, the more vacuum gets created, and it'll start sucking in. You'll start doing things you would never have done otherwise, just to be accepted, just to be liked by people. And that integrity gap gets wider and wider. So in this journey to authenticity, I learned that it wasn't good enough just to see myself differently. I had to actually practice it. I had to act on it. It had to be such a belief at a core level. So once I got to know myself, I had to believe in myself. And it wasn't a prideful thing. If you're doing this right, if you catch what I'm saying today and you start practicing this, it'll humble you. You'll feel emotions like gratitude come into your life. It doesn't make you pride. Pride either puffs up or it covers up. So pride either, makes you think more highly of yourself than you ought, or it makes you feel more lowly than you ought. So when you start to get authentic and know yourself and love yourself for who you are and believe in yourself, it humbles you. It makes you realize, wow, I am so grateful that I have learned this, that I can actually truly accept myself for who I am. And boy, I just want everybody to be able to do that. And I want to just treat people well. It just changed my whole attitude in life when I came to that realization. If it creates pride in you, then like a wrong kind of pride, and it puffs you up and you become arrogant, that's a facade. That's the first sign. By the way, arrogance is the first sign of facade. Or self-denigration, like when you put yourself down, it's a form of pride. And so that's a great way to know, am I being authentic or not? Well, if I get, some attention and it falsely puffs me up because I get attention, that's not authenticity. That's actually not feeding your soul. That's actually showing you there's a gap. Mm. So then you have to make an adjustment and say, okay, well, why? You ask yourself, why did I react that way? Why did I get something out of that? And what do I want to do with that? And it actually gets you to go deeper and deeper into yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. That's actually very, very deep.
It is.
And
it's very deep.
It's very deep. But, like while you were talking about and describing what authenticity was,
yeah,
what came to mind was the Lion King, because he basically, he left the pride because he didn't know who he was. He thought that he had killed his father, but in essence, it was actually his uncle who had
Right.
orchestrated everything, but he lost hope of reality. He lost all senses of all who he
He,
was.
he lost his identity, right? He lost his identity.
Exactly.
And so he had to, I guess, fall into this role that he doesn't
Right.
belong.
Yeah.
He's an outcast. He can't go back. Nobody likes him. So
Yep.
kind of
Yeah.
the same kind of
I,
mirroring.
I,
of what we
I
go
honestly believe that's why we see such an identity crisis in society today. And I'm not talking about, sexuality. I'm not talking about I'm just saying there's an identity crisis in the world today. And I think a lot of it comes from that very thing. We've been told that we did something that brings our value down. I always tell people, your value does not decrease because of somebody's inability to see your worth. You have to believe corely that the creator created you so you have value, because you're in this earth and you're with the family that you're with. You bring value to everything you bring. You touch, you bring value to it because of who you are. So if you're acting in some way that you're not who you are, then you're diminishing the value
Mhm.
that you bring to the table. We need you just the way you were designed to be. And that discovery sets you free, because what happens is you start to realize, for me, of course, in my faith journey, that was a big part of my getting out of addiction, and my healing journey started because I had that epiphany. I had that revelation that there was a God and that he loved me, that he created me with a purpose. And that was a life changer for me. And so it's just important to realize that your value doesn't come from the opinions of others. You can let it, but that's not where it needs to come from. For true authenticity, what you want to have is, you want that opinion of you, or that belief, that self-belief, to come deep within you from something greater than you. So that's where the faith comes in. So when you understand that you were created with tremendous value, you were created to love and be loved, you were created with gifts and abilities, you were created with hopes and dreams,
Mhm.
you were created for that desire to succeed. And when you live that out, when you start to learn to express and receive love, and you learn to use your gifts and abilities to achieve your hopes and dreams, an authenticity starts to develop in you, and your metrics all change then. My metrics are not the world's metrics, society's metrics. My metrics are, am I doing the best I can with what I have?
Mhm.
If I
Okay.
encourage somebody today, if I have, I've had a successful day. Oh, I might have had a lot of things go wrong today, but if I encourage somebody, I'm living authentically. If I have a spat with my wife and I've been rude or inconsiderate to her, I ask myself, is that who I'm not? It's not who I am. That, by the way, that's why negative behavior never feels right.
Mhm.
But what we do is we gloss over it and we keep doubling down on it, trying to make it okay, justifying it, and then it becomes a pattern, but it never feels right. And so then that compels me to go back to my wife and first of all take responsibility, ask forgiveness, tell her I'm sorry, that wasn't who I am, and I want to encourage you now, and I bless her in some way. And so that when you have that in that family dynamic where each person in the family takes responsibility, they're authentic. If authenticity allows you to take responsibility, boy, that family becomes very strong. That relationship becomes very strong because you are supporting all the other pillars. Yeah, I
Yeah, I
hope
think
that.
I think along the journey is that, I don't know if a team you can vouch for this for yourself, or if not, but I come to a point where you can't make everyone happy.
No.
You can be as best as you can. You find out, like you said, that you find out what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, and hopefully your strengths can lift others up.
Yeah.
And if you do that, then you can appeal to some people, but not all, right? And I'm okay with that. I think that's took a long time to not have to, have everybody like me,
Yeah.
or fit in with everybody and connect with everybody and have the same likes and wants as everybody. that would be very boring,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it'd
And
be very
we're
draining.
exactly. And we're all unique. It's impossible to do that. And there's no such thing as perfection. So the striving to perfection is ridiculous, what it shows is that there's a shame base somewhere in us perfectionism is a shame defense. So yeah, so you're totally right. We're not gonna, not every, I know it's hard to believe, but not everybody likes me. And not, it's not, you're just not going to please everybody all the time. And you know what? We can't, listen, we have podcasts and we do these things and we talk about the ideals, right? It's simple, but it's not easy. And I'm not perfect at any of this that I teach. I'm still learning every day. I'm still learning. I always say I didn't learn from book expert. I'm not a book expert. I learned from basically blowing every single thing I've taught today and messing it up. And then I learned, okay, maybe there's something here I need to learn. And so it's so important. Just to quickly touch on the reason that this works is the psychiatry has discovered that people process very similarly. And now we're all different, but we process generally this. We have a feeling, we have a thought about that feeling, and then our behavior will follow that thought. And so our thoughts build belief systems, but if they're generated by our feelings, our emotions in life, then our behaviors are going to reflect that. So, you've heard the term, don't, judge them by their fruit, not by, their personhood. But it's the fruit just shows you that there's something, what the cause and effect is. So for example, if my feeling is I fear rejection, if I feel like I'm rejected, when I'm in pain, this is when I'm in pain, then my thought is I'll do anything to be liked. I don't want to be rejected. And so my behavior is I'll do anything to fit in. I'll create a facade. I'll become whoever wants me to be, whatever they need me to be. And I'm never authentic because I'm always trying to be something I'm not to try and fit in. However, if my feeling genuinely is I feel accepted and loved, then my thought is I can be myself and everything's going to work out. Then my behavior is I treat others with respect and I'll do my best. And that's when I have confidence in who I am. So, authenticity is to have confidence in who you are. It's not to have perfection in who you are. We all make mistakes, but it's the ability when you have confidence in who you are, when it does feel off and you need to make it right, you have the power to go make it right. You have the ability to go do that. And so it's just, remember that if you're feeling something that's negative, then how you change this is I've got to then change my thoughts. I would say, change your mind, change your life. I got to change my thought about what I'm feeling. So if I'm feeling rejection, I got to challenge it and say, why am I feeling that? Why am I believing that I'm so lowly that I'm worthy of rejection? So you got to, and that will help you discover who you are. And then you start to have confidence. Then you're going to say, when I'm feeling rejected, your first thought's going to be, oh, that's a feeling that I don't normally have. I wonder where that's coming from. And you're able to solve it much quicker. So, and your behavior will absolutely reflect it. So emotional intelligence is basically the awareness of your action, is an awareness of your actions and feelings and how they affect those around you. So when you have emotional intelligence, that's all that is. And it helps you understand. So 5 components of emotional intelligence: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness or others awareness, relational management, and empathy. Those are 5 components of emotional intelligence. And when you are authentic, that's what grows, is emotional intelligence. And when you grow in emotional intelligence, you can become more authentic. So the final thing is then you can say, just be yourself. But you got to do all those other things first.
Wow, that's a lot. And a lot of great tips as well that you've given us, a lot of things to ponder over.
Yeah.
Also to relearn perhaps. But it's been definitely a great show, and yeah, it's sad that we have to cut it short, but we do. It's that time again.
Yeah, no problem.
So
That was
thank
so good
you
to be
so
here.
much.
Thank you.
Looking forward to the other two, right? We got two more to go. So
We
got
have
two more to
more
go.
to go. So Mark is actually coming on December 1st, in 2 Thursdays. So we're going to be talking about honesty and honor. So you'll get your 5 pillars then. You want to make
Yeah.
sure you tune in. Then on the 21st, we've got Dr. Teresa coming back on for chronic fatigue. And for the rest of them, stay tuned. We are just figuring out our Christmas lineup. So just stay tuned for that. If you haven't already, please follow us. We are the Healthy Way Vibes on all platforms. Thank you for tuning in and have a wonderful day. Bye for now.
thank you. Thanks, Mark.
See you. Thank you.